A warm welcome to our panelists and attendees of the webinar Conserving the Modern Global Initiatives, Local Solutions, held as part of ECROM lecture series. Pleased to introduce myself, Rohit Jigyasu, Project Manager at ECROM. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, ECROM, the International Center for the Study of the Preservation and Restoration of Cultural Property, is the intergovernmental organization working in the service of its 137 member states for promoting conservation of all forms of cultural heritage in every region of the world. Modern heritage is a testimony to the life, culture, and history of the 20th century. Many of these structures are at the moment in their life cycle where they need attention and repair so that they can remain relevant for future generations. At present, there is a general understanding that this recent heritage needs to be preserved, even though often practicing professionals have to run public campaigns to avoid demolitions. With preservation, time is generally the selector. When enough time has passed, the age value of the building or the site is generally accepted as an argument for preservation. Unfortunately, this argument does not always apply to the most recent past of modern heritage. In fact, conservation of modern heritage has always drawn the attention of ECROM. From 1999 to 2011, ECROM collaborated with the National Board of Antiquities of Finland and Alvar Aalto Academy on the international course on the conservation of modern architecture, MARC. We are currently exploring with the Alvar Aalto Foundation a possible new initiative during the next year. ECROM, along with African World Heritage Fund, UNESCO World Heritage Centre, ECOMOS, University of Cape Town and University College London have also been engaged in the Modern Heritage of Africa initiative. However, there are still many open questions that professionals of today are faced with and need to address. What do we do next with modern heritage? How do we conserve these remains of or the symbols of modern heritage? What is the impact of climate change on modern heritage? This webinar is organized as a roundtable discussion where professionals and actors from countries across continents will be sharing their experiences and discussing the many open questions that we are facing on this topic. So these questions are: how do we conserve our modern heritage? How do we retrofit these structures to suit new functions that are needed? How do we make these buildings more energy efficient? What are the guidelines, standards, and methodologies to guide professionals into this process? And what are the challenges that we are confronting in our own countries with regards to our own professional practice? I am now delighted to introduce you the moderator of this webinar, Ms. Irene Mattini. Irene, if you can just turn on your camera. Irene is professionally trained as an architect at Politecnico di Torino in Italy and at the Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago, and has specialized in historic preservation at the University of Pennsylvania. Irene has developed extensive experience in the investigation, assessment, and development of conservation management plans for historic structures with emphasis on reinforced concrete heritage. Irene has worked on many iconic structures both in United States and Europe, which include the Mission of Alamo in San Antonio, the Parliament Building of Ottawa, and the Chicago Tribune in Chicago. So Irene is currently a lecturer at the School of Design at the University of Pennsylvania and works with Thornton Tomasetti in New York City. So now I pass the floor to Irene to make introductory presentation. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here. And I'm joining you from a rainy day in New York. And I'm excited to having some fun with this webinar and a topic that it's very dear to me. I'm gonna now start giving a little bit we get with the real fun with our panelists. Hold on. You can see my screen.
It's still coming on, it's still being shared, so we're just waiting. Irene, maybe you should stop sharing and share again.
Okay. What about now?
No, you should stop sharing the screen because you have the earlier. Yes, now if you can start sharing again, please. Yes, that's fine. You can turn on the slide mode and then we'll be all fine.
Okay. All right. We good?
Perfect, fine. Please go ahead, Irene.
Okay, so we're here today to talk about a very interesting and dear topic. Conserving on modern architecture is, as most of you know, and we share this passion, it's a very important issue. Like Rohit already mentioned, without doubt, really modern architecture has defined the design of the 20th century and has defined our culture, history, and life. Besides, if you are a concrete lover like myself, there is no doubt by now on the importance of the issue of conservation of this heritage. Yet it's very complex and challenging, but also very interesting and very exciting to get on. Without doubt, we have to recognize that the modern architecture brought in a great technological achievement. If we think about the introduction and the use of reinforced concrete, the development of curtain wall, we think about great architects and engineers like Le Corbusier, Pierluigi Nervi, Saarinen, Alvar Aalto, what type of masterpiece they were able to do by using this material. To think and to imagine, even with the development of prefabrication, which we know in the States, that's the house that America was really waiting for, as most of the ads at that time say. The majority of modern architecture was also inspired by a collective optimism and this sense of opportunity, where most of the buildings of the structure have really this emancipatory character with it. Ironically or sarcastically, often they were intended to serve a greater societal purpose, but it was often limited in their acceptance. And this somehow still plays out today, because although some of the iconic structure are definitely praised by professionals, by a professional audience, there are still some that are mostly rejected by public. So still today, although there are a number of international organizations that try to protect and have built a great level of awareness on this building, still today, quite a few professionals are faced with battles for demolitions. This is one of the recent one that the foundation of Pierluigi Nervi project won and fought for the Stadio Franchi, one of the masterpieces of Pierluigi Nervi in Florence, Italy, that was facing demolition by the city hall, by the municipality, and they were able to save. And now they're faced with the new battle, which is, trying to be sensitive and pick the right design for the rehabilitation of this structure. Highly recommend to check their website. Another story that it's unfortunately a sadder story is the Nakajin capsule that was designed in Tokyo, designed by Kisho Kurokawa. Unfortunately, it is a sad story because it is being demolished as we speak. Nakajin is really an important example of post-war architecture in Japan and another great example of metabolism architecture. So there are a lot of open questions. There are some questions that we are trying to answer, and we are managing our way through it. Professionals, we are faced with quite a few challenges in the preservation of this recent past. So one of the first things that it's important to reflect on and to look at what are the guidelines, the standards, the methodology, are there enough? What have we produced so far to help and assist professionals in the renovation of this with this architecture? It has been quite some time if we look at the chronology in terms of like the creation of international organizations that formed or that have been involved in the preservation of modern architecture. You know, we think about Docomomo, which is definitely, if not the most important organization that promotes the preservation of modern architecture, celebrated 34 years, was started in 1988. And we see that over the past decade, there are quite a few organizations that have been getting involved internationally, and these are just a few of them. To the Getty Keeping It Modern initiative that has allowed to protect and promote quite a few important heritage structure. In terms of, you know, the major documents and guidelines that have been produced, from the early on, we start with the endowment statement that was published by the Docomomo in the early 90s, to the more recent one with the Cadiz document that was produced as a result of an European Horizon project, the Innova Concrete. But there is one comment we need to reflect on with all these different documents that have been produced over time, is that they all share a common general guidelines, general direction in terms of like how we should approach this type of structure, but most of them, all of them, there is still a lack of practical guidelines. There is still a lack of toolkit, for better word, that we need to provide professionals when they're faced with the renovation of this structure, let alone more local guidelines. And this is one of the reasons that we wanted to have a diverse table with different speakers from different countries to hear different experiences, because we know if we're working on a structure in India, definitely it's a different approach that we need to have if we're working in Ivrea or if we're working in New York or South America, because every building, depending on the context, the environment plays a huge role in the deterioration and in the life of a structure. So there is quite a bit of work that we still need to do, and we have to push this international collaboration to produce really great and useful products. This data is also confirmed by a recent survey that was published by the Getty GCI in collaboration with Docomomo International. Was a survey that was done amongst over 200 worldwide institutions to see, what is how many programs are offered on this topic. And one of the striking data, if you review their survey, is that if you look at the percentage of professional training that it's offered, these are only over 200, so it is yet a limited number, but this is already showing a trend in which direction we need to push, as we have a little bit of work to do. As professionals, preservationists, as actors in this play, one of the questions that we need to answer, and we need to try to give more context to it, we need to establish what is the patina or patina that we want to conserve and preserve of this architecture. One of the fundamental distinctions between the preservation of modern architecture and of traditional building is that it's extremely accelerated rate of replacement. While more traditional materials and construction practices tend to have a slower rate of replacement, ranging for decades or even centuries, if we think about, the Pantheon in Rome or other ancient structures, the innovative materials and efficient designs of modern buildings frequently necessitate repairs and replacement much sooner, which face quite a bit of a challenge for us as professionals. And this brings on the next question that we are faced with. Do we have specialized skills? Do we have enough craftsmanship out there to do this type of work? And let's just think, for example, of concrete patch repair. I'm sure some of the panelists and people in the audience have experienced this. You know, I always say to the student, it's really a jungle out there. It's one of the hardest things to perform, especially, you know, on exposed concrete structures. So it is very important that along with practical guidelines, we also try to build into this training, because in particular, if you think about exposed reinforced concrete, you know, the aesthetic of this building, it is the texture, is the expression of this architecture. So anytime we go and do any intervention, it's going to change the aesthetic, is going to change the story of the building. So very important, we need to train and we need to develop more specialized skills out there. The next big question that we're faced today, it's also how do we change, how do we adapt these structures to, you know, the functions, or how do we reuse this type of structure? And another big question, how we respond to climate change and nature. You know, I chose this emblematic picture to show that, you know, nature is stronger than concrete. Believe it or not. So adaptation, it's a very important question for us. And as a professionals, when we're faced clients, owners, or any stakeholders, we have to think about maintenance. We have to think about prevention, about monitoring, because when we're working with cultural heritage structure, we cannot afford for this structure to become obsolete. So starting to think in this direction, we're running out of time a little bit, but it's really important that this discussion starts from the beginning when we sit down and develop repair and intervention strategies. So with this, I'm very pleased to open the table to the great 5 speakers that are joining us today, and they allow us to get really a diverse array of experience and context as we are going to travel to different places. We're going to start with Shikha Jain. Shikha is from India and is director of Dronan and chairperson of Dronan Foundation. Then we will travel to Japan with Hirofumi Kawa, which is project manager of secondment in Japan, which will bring us his experience and the Japanese context. We're going to travel to Ivrea, the first and only UNESCO World Heritage Site, modern architecture, modern heritage in Italy, Renato Lavarini, which is the site coordinator of the UNESCO site. We're going to travel then to New York. Glenn Bornesian is founding principal of Integrated Conservation Resources. Glenn has worked in quite a remarkable iconic structures in America and worldwide. And then we're traveling to warm Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, with Carla Maria Teixeira, which is a technical assistant at the Casa de Osvaldo Cruz. I would like to ask the speakers to quickly turn on their camera and to just say hi to our audience briefly, and then we're gonna get started. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Before I proceed, just few comments in terms of housekeeping during the webinar. This is more for the audience. This is a roundtable discussion, so please send over questions, curiosity, comments that you have that we can share with our panelists to make this conversation more exciting. You can send your queries and comment via the QA icon that you see at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will keep us some question after the presentation. We will go through all the panelists' presentation first, and then we will start the discussion. If we don't get to your question due to shortage of time, please feel free. We'll distribute our email address that we'll pass on the question to the panelists. With this, I will get started. So I will just ask all the panelists to accept Shikha, which will be our first to turn off their camera. And with great pleasure, I will I will start introducing Shika. Shika is Drona Foundation Director and Chairperson. As I mentioned before, Shika is an architect with an extensive portfolio on cultural heritage that covers conservation, world heritage, and museum planning in India and overseas, largely through her organization. As an international expert, she has advised government organizations and UNESCO offices in Singapore, United Arab Emirates, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Indonesia. It's a great pleasure to learn from you, Shika, and to learn a little bit and get excited about the India and some of, great structures that modernist architecture produced there. So with that, I will pass on the floor to you. Thank you, Shika.
Thank you, Irene, for that introduction, and thanks to Ikram for inviting me today. Greetings to everyone. I'm pleased to present an overview of the modern heritage status in Asia with a specific focus on the Indian subcontinent and India at this Ikram series today. The ICOMOS gap analysis of 2004 clearly outlined modern heritage in the underrepresented category. Recognition of modern heritage in Asia and specifically India is a recent phenomenon. When UNESCO's World Heritage Center held its regional meeting on modern heritage for Asia and the Pacific in Chandigarh in 2003, India only had one World Heritage property from the 20th century on the list. The World Heritage List and tentative lists for South Asia also reflected this aspect, this particular gap, and the gap analysis as per typological framework showed underrepresentation of modern heritage, while the gap analysis as per chronological framework had lesser sites from 20th century also. During the revision of tentative list in India from 2012 to 2015, a conscious effort was made to include more modern and industrial heritage sites. As a result, India's World Heritage presence in modern architecture has substantially increased in last few years with additional listing, most strongly represented by the transnational inscription of the architectural works of Le Corbusier, including the Capitol complex at Chandigarh in 2016. Inclusion of the Baha'i Temple of Worship in Delhi and other 20 sites on the tentative list further indicates increased awareness and promotion of this heritage in the country. Despite these initiatives, the significance of modern heritage in India is yet to be fully recognized. Considering the vast expanse of unprotected heritage, it is not surprising that very few of the iconic modern structures in India are protected and even fewer that are being consciously conserved. While 20th century urban heritage in modern cities of Chandigarh and Bhubaneswar are well protected through recognition and grading in the city master plans,
Shika,
singular
maybe
modern
your slides are not being moving, so maybe you can check the slides.
Okay, I think I'm just speaking more on this
All right,
particular
okay.
slide. So yeah. So it's just to explain that while the site for Chandigarh has been inscribed and Chandigarh and Bhubaneswar are well protected with grading and recognition, there are important modern landmarks across the country which are largely unprotected and face serious threats, such as the demolition of Hall of Nations designed by Raj Rewal at Pragati Maidan, New Delhi in 2017, and the recent concern for the Indian Institute of Management, which you can see on the right side, designed by Louis Kahn in Ahmedabad. Initiatives such as the Keeping It Modern grant of the Getty Foundation and the World Monuments Fund Watch have made substantial contribution in safeguarding modern heritage at a global level. The impact of KIM grant is becoming visible as a research resource for modern heritage conservation, with several conservation management plans incorporating an interdisciplinary and inclusive approach, serving as benchmarks for safeguarding Asia's modern heritage, as we can see in this slide showing the Sydney Opera House and other iconic modern heritage structures in Japan and Taiwan. Gandhi Bhavan, designed by Pierre Jeanneret, was the first building in India to receive the KIM grant in 2015. The process of preparing the conservation management plan was completed in early 2017 and is actively used by the university to complete necessary repairs and conservation work, including the preservation of Gandhi Bhavan's distinctive facade made from white crushed river pebbles embedded into the concrete. Another research-based implementation grant in 2020 is in use to conserve two of its most definitive elements, the reflecting pool and the exterior concrete precast cladding panels. Once completed, we hope the work will set a new standard in the field while meticulously preserving this important landmark. The Government Museum and Art Gallery, Chandigarh, received the KIM grant in 2017. This research-based conservation management plan for the museum building designed by Corbusier in 1962 analyzes its contextual and climatic setting to arrive at a model that encourages conservation of the building materials, its internal environment, and exterior landscape, including aspects of passive control and preventive conservation carried out by the GCI. The Getty Conservation Institute steered a parallel supporting study of the collective series of the 3 museums of unlimited growth, which were designed by Corbusier, including this second one at Tokyo, which is a World Heritage Site, and the third one at Ahmedabad. The role of climate change in deterioration of modern heritage of Asia is another critical aspect. Concerned by the condition of exterior finishes of the iconic Baha'i House of Worship in New Delhi, the management commissioned a conservation and maintenance proposal for the structure in February 2021, based on earlier recommendations of a preliminary assessment carried out in 2020. The scope of work covered 4 major components: structural assessment, finishes assessment, services, and capacity building of the maintenance staff. Visual and microscopic assessment of finishes, including Italian marble and concrete in the exterior and interior, revealed that they are primarily facing degradation issues due to the quality of air and water in the surroundings, as you can see from these slides, which show the microscopic assessment of the marble on the exterior of the Baha'i temple. Pollutants affecting the marble properties is well under the prescribed limits, and the aspects of particulate matter 2.5 and 10, which are more towards occupants' well-being and health, are the key criteria now for mitigation. Besides the action plan to treat these microenvironment issues, it was also observed that use of modernized equipment for cleaning and maintenance of marble and concrete, along with regular staff training and monitoring of material status, is equally important. So training programs and maintenance manual was designed for capacity building of the staff. Like the Baha'i House of Worship, there are several iconic modern heritage structures across Asia that may be facing similar threats and climate change issues to be addressed. Thank you, and I hope this has provided a brief overview of the status of modern heritage in India. Thank you.
Thank you, Shika. This was very nice. Thank you for bringing up. Shika already pointed out quite a few important points. And one is like, although some of the most iconic structures have, been recognized, there is a lot of work to do for some more minor heritage structure, which are also very, very important. So we'll bring on some of the question and we'll expand later. Thank you so much, Shika. Now we're going to travel to Japan with our friend Dr. Hirofumi Ikawa, which is actually in Rome. Lucky him, is project manager for ICROM secondment in Japan. Hirofumi worked as a restoration architect at the Japanese Association for Conservation of Architectural Monument since 2003 and has been a senior specialist at the Agency for Cultural Affairs since 2018. And has been seconded to ICROM since 2021. We're really excited to learn about Japan, and the floor is yours. Take the stage on. Thanks, Hirofumi. You're ready to go.
Thank you very much. Now, could you see my slide?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, no problem. Okay, then start. I would like to start my presentation. Okay, in this presentation, I will explain the issues involved in the preservation of post-war architecture as modern heritage in Japan from the three aspects, namely survey, designation and registration, repair and management. I believe that these issues are not unique in Japan, but are common worldwide. Japan modern heritage, while highly regarded internationally, is in danger of being lost at a rapid rate. The photo on the left shows Yoshiro Taniguchi's Hotel New Otani, which was rebuilt in time for the Tokyo Olympics last year. And on the right, in the Setagaya City Hall, designed by Kunio Maekawa, a student of Core Visual. Under these circumstances, the Agency for Cultural Affairs has been implementing the urgent survey of modern heritages as a nationwide since 2017. The survey targets architectural and civil engineering structures built after World War II until 1999. On the process of surveying, there are some issues related with evaluation, namely locally and mass-produced products. As for locality, modern heritage tend to be evaluated with famous architects, and those kind of architecture concentrate to the big city. So we try to find unfamous but important local heritages in each region. As for mass-produced products, there is an issue how to evaluate them, such as the public housing complexes that were built in very large numbers after World War II and are now rapidly being lost. Next, I would like to talk about the designation and the restoration of modern heritage after the survey. Currently, there are 12 modern heritages designated as national important cultural properties. The number of designated modern heritages remain low because there are two issues for the designation to proceed. One is the urgent survey of modern and contemporary buildings has just begun. So it is difficult to value the buildings without a general understanding of modern heritage in Japan. Another is that modern heritage is difficult to obtain the consent of owners as many facilities are still in active use. Owners are concerned that the designation as a cultural property will place restrictions on the use of the buildings. Every effort is made to convince the owners that they can use their modern heritage while preserving it as a cultural heritage. For example, the Hizuchi Elementary School in the photo is famous as a representative work of Udon modernism architecture in Japan. As this elementary school is still in use today, conservation was undertaken to create a learning environment for the children and to conserve the well-designed spaces and details. On the other hand, in addition to nationally designated cultural properties, there is a system of registering cultural properties that owners can apply for themselves. The system was created to ensure that as many architecture in danger of disappearing due to urban development as possible remain intact. The system has been functioning effectively in terms of assigning a certain value to cultural properties as a starting point for their protection. Examples include Tokyo Tower, the symbol of Tokyo, of course, the International Style Riverside Building built in 1965, and the first prefabricated house commercialized in Japan in the 1960s, Sekisui House Type A, and public housing complexes in the post-war period, and the Toko-en by metabolism architect Kikutake Kiyokuni. I would move to the third topic and explain the issues of conservation, repair, and management utilization. Conservation and repair of modern heritage under government subsidized projects was carried out at the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum and the World Peace Memorial Cathedral. The conservation and repair of both buildings are focused on thematic reinforcement and provide suggestions on how conservation and repair of modern heritage should be done. The issue for conservation and repair as a cultural heritage are 1, large scale, 2, active facilities, 3, conservation of industrial product, and 4, design. Due to its large scale, it is impossible to conserve everything. Therefore, important parts of the cultural property should be identified beforehand in order to ensure its value and should be repaired. Photo shows Yoyogi Stadium. It has the largest building floor area among the current nationally designated cultural properties. About 2,300 square meters, the vast building is not only a stadium, but also has various uses. In active facilities, it is necessary to plan for use in anticipation of changes in user demands and required functions, and to consider how to match the value of the cultural properties with the needs of the users. The photo shows the Museum of Western Art designed by Le Corbusier in order to continue using the building as an art museum. Part of the pilotis was used as an exhibition space, and the lighting fixture were used to control the amount of light rather than bringing in natural light. Regarding conservation of industrial products, the specification of new construction materials or industrial products that came into production after World War II are changing rapidly. Due to changes in market needs and regulations, these products could be updated in a few decades. For this premise, it is necessary to determine what should be conserved for value assessment. Photo shows the Farmer Museum of Modern Art, Kanagawa Prefecture. The original material had to be replaced because the exterior material contained asbestos. When considering design as an object of evaluation, it is necessary to discuss how to determine inheritance in conservation and restoration. If the original space or home is renovated by the same architect or his successor, or if the design is lost due to change from a short-term perspective, it is necessary to consider how to find out what the building should be as a cultural heritage. The photo shows the Peace Memorial Museum designed by Kenzo Tange, which was extensively renovated by himself, again, about 50 years after its completion. So at last, I conclude with a summary of the issues of modern heritage that I have mentioned: research issues, issues of designation, and registration issues of restoration and management. Then, for those interested in Japanese modern heritage, here is a useful link. In particular, the selection of the 20th century heritage site is a good starting point for thinking about what the 20th century was in Japan, rather than just from the perspective of modern heritages. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rofumi. Very great, very great. Thank you. I guess, one of the things that struck me in your presentation was Hirofumi brought on another challenge, that a lot of these structures are very large scaled. They're either publicly owned or privately owned. So that becomes another challenge in how do we reuse it, how we adapt to the functions of today. And the second thing that was striking that you brought is the manufactured materials that are deteriorating at a very fast rate. What do? We just, we replace the whole facade, or, so those are all conservation strategies that are quite challenging when you're faced with this. So thank you, Hirofumi. We will continue then the conversation. We are now going to travel to New York. We have our panelist, Glenn Bornasian. Glenn, thank you for being with us. It's a pleasure to have you on board. Glenn is the principal of Integrated Conservation Resources. Glenn is a practitioner and an architectural conservator that began ICR over 35 years ago, and he has been involved in quite a few iconic structures, naming some, and Glenn will show us Guggenheim Museum, TWA, and so on. So it's great pleasure. Glenn is a good storyteller. The stage is yours. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Irene, and thank you, Ikram, for inviting me to be part of this webinar. It's truly an honor, and welcome everyone to rainy New York. As Irene said, I began our company over 35 years ago, where we both design architectural conservation programs for historic buildings and monuments, and have a craft division where we can implement some of the projects that we design. This consistent overlap of the design and build challenges spanning over this long period of time has, I believe, given us a unique insight into the development of conservation treatment options that fully comply with local, national, and international guidelines. In addition, our approach also provides owners with appropriate options at different costs. Of course, this range of options come with advantages and disadvantages, and I believe it is the careful study and consideration of these variations with the owners that result in successful treatment plans and the design of long-term cyclical maintenance programs that can guide the restoration into the future and save costs over time. We have had the very good fortune of designing architectural conservation programs for a number of mid-century modern structures whose materials and methods of construction are representative, I think, of the many challenges threatening such structures internationally. A few representative projects that we have worked on is the Guggenheim Museum, which was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright and completed in 1959. The TWA Flight Center at JFK Airport, designed by Eero Saarinen and completed in 1962. Just a few slides that show the amazing intersection of architecture and art. The US Embassy in New Delhi, India, designed by Edward Durrell Stone and completed in 1959. The exterior stone facades of the structures on the United Nations campus in New York City, designed by a committee of architects, including Le Corbusier, Oscar Niemeyer, Vladimir Bodiansky, Wallace Harrison, and Max Abramowitz. The buildings were completed over the course of different years ranging from 1950 to 1952 approximately. And the last one I wanted to show is the Lever House, designed by Skidmore, Owens, and Merrill and completed in 1951. As architectural conservators, we follow a certain theory and philosophy which we apply to all of our projects. We find that if this process is properly designed and followed, we can develop numerous treatment options, provide cost variations, and achieve successful results. I thought I would take the amount of time that I have left to present an overview of this process, which I think will give you some insight into how we think, how we make decisions, and how ultimately our work affects the final restoration and maintenance of the historic structure. So in the design of our programs, we try to save as much original material as possible or as practical, to respect the design intent of the architect and craftspeople who are involved in the design or the construction of a particular building, monument, or site, and also to design materials and methods that are both physically and aesthetically compatible with the original construction materials. To achieve these goals, we employ the following steps. We carry out archival research. We carry out material and condition surveys. We design and implement both laboratory testing and field testing. We also implement probes, surface probes into historic fabric in a very careful way to try to understand the cause and effect relationships between the material and the conditions. And we also design non-destructive evaluation techniques, and finally implement mock-ups to help owners understand and ourselves what the possibilities could be, both in terms of their aesthetic value, but also the time and costs associated with implementing those. This approach helps us understand the original design intent, design architectural conservation specifications, details, and drawings that meet the steps outlined, and help our clients understand the visual and cost implications prior to launching expensive multi-year projects. Once the design phase is completed, we assist the owner in selecting qualified contractors. We test and approve craftspeople, review, fine-tune, and approve mock-ups, and provide quality assurance during the implementation of the work. All of this to ensure that the goals that were established in the design phase are carried out. Given all the information and technical data that has been generated as a result of the design of a restoration program, we believe this is the optimal time to use this data, as well as the intimate knowledge of the building system, to design a cyclical maintenance program. All too often, after such a restoration is completed, future maintenance is not considered. In fact, most times the maintenance procedures that are implemented begin to alter the original designed aesthetic, and at times even damage the original historic materials. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to joining the conversation.
Thank you, Glenn. I highly recommend, if you have some time, to take a plane to JFK and to just sleep one night to the TWA hotel, because it's truly, if you're a concrete lover like myself, it's truly a remarkable structure. I will be brief, but there are two things that I want everyone to think about it that Glenn mentioned. Is one, it's future maintenance, and one is when you sit down at the table with your client or stakeholder, don't just develop the strategy for repair, but also includes maintenance program, also include the future in your plan, because it's like us human bodies, you need to maintain in order to in order to perform. So the same thing for the structure. So always the concept of future maintenance, it's very important. The second thing is respect design intent, what Glenn said, and the good and bad, I guess, the two sides of the story of conserving the recent past is that they're relatively recent. So sometimes the architect is still alive. Sometimes workers or the maintenance person that took care of the structure is still alive. So it becomes like either, depends how you look at it, depends how difficult is the relationship that you develop with the client or with the person involved in the project, but are great resources. And it makes also the conservation of this recent past exciting and challenging at the same time. With that, I would like to invite to the floor my colleague and friend Renato Lavarini. We're now switching a little bit. Good morning, Renato. We're now switching a little bit gear, because we heard so far from practitioners, we heard one side of the story. Now we're going to hear, the more burdened side of the story, someone that has to face budget, someone has to face, people that has to convince, bureaucrats and politicians to do the right thing. Renato is the site coordinator of the Ivrea Industrial City UNESCO World Heritage. Great place. It's the first recognized UNESCO World Heritage Site for modern heritage. And it's with great pleasure to bring you on. We want to hear your side of the story. So the floor is yours. Thanks, Renato, and welcome.
Thank you for the floor, Irene. Hello, everybody from the sunny Italy. I wish to introduce Ivrea Industrial City of the 20th Century World Heritage Site, inscribed on the World Heritage List in 2018, and what means for us conserving the modern. I would like to okay. At first, Ivrea is a little historical city founded around the 10th century in the northwest of Italy, and near Turin, Milan, Genoa, and near Lyon in France. In the 20th century, one of the most important companies in Italy and in the world was established in Ivrea, the Olivetti firm. 2 words about the historic industrial firm. Olivetti. Olivetti has been the most innovative company of the 20th century, and the innovative elements of this company have been recognized by the World Heritage List Committee. For example, from mechanical to digital industry, from machine for writing through machine for calculating until mainframe and personal computers, product design, welfare policies for employee, families, and community, highest level cultural projects. And urban and architecture design have been the standing highest expression of the character mentioned above and of the Adriano Olivetti philosophy. The site. The core zone, marked in red, of our site measures 52 hectares, and the buffer zone to 278 hectares. We have 27 buildings listed in this World Heritage Site, production buildings, services buildings, and residential buildings. Now, I wish to inform you about some numbers referring our sites. The 83% of the property is for company service, offices, and former production, and only the 17% is for residential uses. Only the 2% of these buildings are public. The 98% is private ownership. In 2015, when we finished the nomination file, the 40% of the buildings were unused or vacant. In 2021, only the 11.5% is unused or vacant. The timeline of construction of our site, we have to start in early 20th century with the direct brick buildings to 1988 with the new offices building. During this time, we leased the ICO, the production building ICO, engineer Camillo Olivetti, the nursery, the social houses, the study and research center, and so on. Designed by some architects belonging to the modern movement, Figini, Pollini, Nizzoli, Olivieri, Vittoria, Gardella, and other of these. Now, I would like to show you a view of the building of the site, the oldest and the modern. You can see some example of the modern architecture in Ivrea. This is one of the slide, and the other with residential buildings. And services and the nursery. Well, for us, it's important to take in count the statement of World Heritage Committee, starting from the criterion 4 that the industrial city of Ivrea is an ensemble of outstanding architectural quality that represents the world of Italian modernist designer architects and demonstrate an exceptional example of 20th century development. This is the criterion for our inscription. We got an integrity statement. The integrity is based on the exclusion of the building spaces and urban required. The state of conservation of the city's companies is variable. The integrity of the property is considered to be vulnerable due to many factors of the pressure, including the encroachment of new urban development, the deteriorating condition of some key industrial buildings and building interiors, and the existence of some visually intrusive new construction. The high number of vacant buildings and the need to find new uses also contribute to Ivrea's vulnerable integrity. This is our problem. The authenticity, I note that many elements have maintained their original characteristic in spite of the changes to production, and a large number of the buildings are currently vacant, and there is a risk of gradual loss of the authenticity of the property. Well, the World Heritage Committee requests the state party and the Ivrea municipality to ensure the effective coordination between national, regional, and local levels of protection, and to provide a strategic conservation plan for the property. And recommend us the full implementation of clearly set out of the monitoring system, and ensuring that all new construction projects, including adaptive reuse that could impact the standing universal value of the property, are subject of heritage impact assessment and are communicated to the World Heritage Center. That's our recommendation. Well, the action plan of the World Heritage Site Management also concern protection, documentation, and conservation action and measures. The strategic conservation plan has to take into account that the 98% of the buildings are owned by private owners. For that, it is necessary to share the guidelines for conservation, restoration, and reuse of the property. The future of this World Heritage Site is not to freeze some vacant buildings or to make impossible the work in the building, but to harmonize the conservation with the economic activities needs. These ones can financially support the maintenance and then the conservation. The Italian national and local laws and rules protect the buildings and the landscape of this World Heritage Site, but not always is able to understand the values of its components, tangible and intangible, of the outstanding universal value of the UNESCO statement, including the people in charge of applying the law. In Italy, there is a lack of knowledge on the conservation of modern. We cannot consider and interpret the modern conservation landmarks like the ancient one. There is still quite some work to be done for the conservation landmarks of the modern heritage that can be applied to the national law. The Ivrea's municipality has, since the end of 19th, a modern architecture regulation included in the land use plan that recognize all the Olivetti's architecture and provide for conservation and restoration rules. Ivrea Industrial City of the 20th Century UNESCO World Heritage Site is the only Italian World Heritage Site of the industrial heritage of the past century, inscribed on the World Heritage List. It has been very hard to build the nomination file because of conservation bias about the modern. Also, the heritage impact assessment is not an assessment only for buildings or for the landscape, but for the maintenance of the relationship between the tangible, buildings and landscape, and intangible culture, social policies, innovation elements. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Renato. Ivrea is definitely, the Silicon Valley of Italy at that time. I mean, what it's interesting to see from your slide is that from the product that was made there to all the buildings and the development of this industrial city, we can really say this is a laboratory of the modern. From the Olivate innovative products to, all the buildings on the campus have all the different materials, all different construction types, from, cladding to curtain wall to reinforced concrete. So you have a lot in your hands. And I wanna just remark the number, a couple of the challenge that Renato is faced with is 98% of these buildings are private. And you're talking, it's all for the most part office buildings. So in order to reuse them or readapt, it takes quite a bit of work. And it's remarkable, the two numbers I wrote down, and we'll talk more later, that the unused one went from 40% to 11.5. So you did quite a bit of great work. That's why you probably got white hair by now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Renato. We'll come back to you. We are now going to call to the stage our friend and colleague, Carla Maria Coelho. We're going to Brazil. Good morning, bom dia. You are the last but not the least. Carla is from the Casa de Osvaldo Cruz, the Frio Cruz in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She works as a technical assistant at the foundation, where she specialized in preservation policies, preventive conservation, and risk management for cultural heritage. Carla is also professor in the Executive Master Program in Preservation and Management of Cultural Heritage in the Science and Health at Casa de Osvaldo Cruz. With that, welcome, Carla. Obrigada. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Your presentation.
Yes.
You are good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Irene. And thank you. I would like to thank ICROM for the invitation and for the opportunity to discuss such an important topic. Hello, everyone. So I would like to start by contextualizing a little bit the conservation of modern heritage in Brazil from very brief analysis of the main threats to this heritage today. Although the first modern buildings in the country were listed in the 40s, modern heritage is still impacted by the lack of recognition of its importance. The country is going through a moment of reduction of the resource destined to cultural heritage and the weakening of preservation agencies. In 2021, Capanema Palace, a symbol of modern Brazilian architecture and a public building, was included in a list of dozens of other buildings to be auctioned, despite the various activities and cultural institutions it houses. A national and international mobilization was necessary, which included the manifestation of institutions such as ICOMOS and DOCOMOMO. Regarding the impacts of climate change on modern heritage, there are still very few studies in Brazil. And considering the characteristics of the different regions of the country, the effects of the change will take place differently. But some impacts may be highlighted, such as damage caused by the increased incidence of storms, the enhancement of infiltration problems in buildings, and impacts on the drainage of sites due to increased rainfall, and also flooding to sites due to the rise in sea level. In a country with approximately 8,000 kilometers of coastline, this is an emergency situation to be faced. In the following example, we see marked in yellow the sites of some modern buildings located on the coast of Rio de Janeiro city that may be impacted by the rise in sea level. As we see, in this simulation, considering the scenario of a 2-degree increase in global temperature by the end of the 21st century. As Bogarino and Cantiani state, the fragility of the modern would require a management tool that gives priority to preventive actions and long-term strategies, stores information, avoids replacements, invasive or unnecessary intervention, engages highly skilled professionals on an ongoing basis, and increases users' awareness. The importance of preventive approach to cultural heritage in Brazil has recently grown, but we still continue to act mainly in a reactive way. It was only in 2018 that our national preservation policy began to contemplate the development of conservation plans for cultural assets. And there are still no conservation guidelines or methodology specifically designed for modern heritage. ICOMOS Brazil is currently preparing the translation into Brazilian Portuguese of the Madrid-New Delhi documents that's still not well known in the national context. So now I would like to talk a little about the experience of Fundação Oswaldo Cruz, or Fiocruz, in developing preventive conservation plans. The foundation is linked to the Brazilian Ministry of Health, and it was created in 1900 in Rio de Janeiro to produce medicines and conduct research in the public health area. Today, we are responsible for the conservation of historic buildings and collections related to the history of science and health. And the institution team defined the methods to develop to the development of preventive conservation plans that consider 4 axes: characterization, diagnosis, risk assessment, and procedures. In 2015, we were also selected by the Getty Foundation's Keeping It Modern initiative to receive funds to support the development of a preventive conservation plan for the Arthur Neiva Pavilion, one of our modern buildings. The work was coordinated by the Department of Historical Heritage team and advised by specialists from different areas, as we can see in this slide. The Arthur Neiva Pavilion was designed in 1942 by Jorge Ferreira, architect of the Ministry of Education and Health, to house specialized training courses and laboratories. Until today, the building is used for its original purpose and by the same institute. One of the most preeminent elements is the artistic tile panel designed by Roberto Burle-Marx, who also designed the gardens. The panel in shades of blue and white was installed on a curved, reinforced concrete wall without any type of protection. And the use of artistic tile panels in Brazil follows the tradition of Brazilian colonial architecture of Portuguese influence, reinterpreted by modern architects. In the context of the Keeping It Modern project, it was possible to assess the current conditions of the structural elements, masonry and coatings, taking into consideration the presence of fissures and other degradation problems. Technical inspections and chemical testing took place in order to indicate possible causes of damage and to point out recommendation and recovery methodologies. A specialist was hired to conduct the tile mural assessment, which included visual inspection and laboratory analysis of samples. It was possible to identify and quantify the main damage, such as fissures, losses in glaze and biscuit contents, biodeterioration, among others. Several communication and education actions were carried out within the scope of the project, including the photo campaign created to collect images of the building taken by its users, and a seminar involving different stakeholders that interact with the building. These actions aimed to increase public awareness on the relevance of modern heritage, often underappreciated and not recognized as cultural heritage. The action supported by the Getty Foundation was a very important first step for the development of the building's preventive conservation plan, which continued with studies to support the value assessment of the building, the analysis of data about the building context, considering the local climate and climate change scenarios, and comprehensive risk identification and risk assessment for the building, trying to understand the whole complexity of issues that may threaten the values of the building. And also the definition of procedures that are mainly based on monitoring and periodic actions that seek to mitigate risks and interrupt or reduce the speed of deterioration processes. The Keeping It Modern initiative, which included 3 other Brazilian buildings, School of Architecture and Urbanism, Glass House by Lina Bobardi, and the São Paulo Art Museum, left an important legacy of experiences in the development of conservation plans for modern buildings in Brazil that are available for consultation in the project's online library. And we hope that these projects can serve as reference for advancing preventive conservation and risk management for the 20th century heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carla. I guess Carla was the last but not least, in the sense that, you know, we close by thinking about prevention, right? So prevention as a way, as an answer to combating climate change adaptation, prevention as an answer to mitigate the risk, to help owners and stakeholders to better budget, and allow, you know, the structure to continue to exist and to live, basically. So with that, thank you, Carla. Now it's the exciting part. Please, all the panelists, turn on your camera. We're going to get started. I would like to thank you all again for giving us your insightful experience coming from different countries, very diverse backgrounds. So this has been a fun ride. Please, audience, hope you have enjoyed it. Start sending on your questions. We're going to start opening up the floor with a little bit of a general reflection to all of you. And just please, take one minute. The alarm will start going off if you continue after 1 minute. But the first thing I want you guys to reflect is, you know, based on your knowledge and experience and your, you know, your country, your context, what were the most significant challenges that you faced in conserving modern heritage recently? So Shika will just go through the order. Shika, you can take on the mic.
So, I mean, with my experience of working with modern heritage here in India, I find 2 key issues, you know, that are there. One is about establishing value for modern heritage, you know, to make people understand that this is so recent, yet this is heritage, and also to establish the value analysis on how to, what is the significance of materials like concrete and terrazzo and those kind of materials which are fairly new, and you would find it in their houses and other places. And it's very difficult to make people understand what is of value, you know, in this particular heritage. And that's the reason we are facing so much demolition. And secondly, I think because there is such diversity in India, you know, in terms of the local climate, because if you compare Chandigarh with Delhi, I found that in Chandigarh, the concrete fared really well. And the French expert from Corbusier Foundation, in fact, exchanged this with me that the concrete here in this particular temperature is faring better than the cold climate of France. Whereas in the other case in Delhi, where we see extreme pollution, the Italian marble on the Bahai is suffered so badly that when we contacted Margraf, the Italian contractors from whom these were sourced, they were shocked to see the degradation that it had gone through. So it's just this diversity of climate in different places. Both of these cities are in the north of India, yet within a short distance of 4 hours of drive, you find such diversity. So that is another challenge of treating the materials that I find here.
Thank you. Very good point. Hirofumi, take it on.
Okay, after all, the issue of modern heritage in Japan is to make sure that as many people as possible understand its importance. The Agency for Cultural Affairs and many other related organizations are providing information via the internet. And I think it is important to continuously these efforts throughout 4 years. Yeah.
Thank you. Glenn.
I don't know, for us, and from the perspective that we take, working with both public and private clients, I find that the challenges are different. For instance, if we're working with a public client, like the Guggenheim Museum, they saw this building as a part of their collection, and they allowed us to do the testing that was required to understand it, just like they would have maybe a piece of fine art. So we were working with that division within their group to look at the building as an object and to understand the cause and effect relationships so that we could prioritize them and develop a work plan. On the other side, maybe with owners who find themselves with important mid-century modern structures who are more, in the private sector, having them think like that is not easy. And the fact that these buildings are relatively new and the amount of conservation methods and materials that have been established for mid-century modern materials is relatively new. Convincing them that sort of an approach is required is a bit more difficult. But I don't know, I think for me as a conservator, those have been some of the larger challenges. And I think too, in the United States, we're still developing physically and aesthetically compatible repairs. And I think, Irene, what you were saying earlier about the complexity of designing, let's say, composite repairs that match exposed concrete, like is what's behind you, is extremely difficult. It's not like a piece of limestone that's very homogeneous. It's very complicated. It's real artwork. And if it isn't done correctly, it stands out inappropriately. So I think there's a lot to talk about, a lot of guidelines to develop, but I think we're getting there.
Exactly. It's always scary when you show up to site and you talk to the contractor and he says concrete repairs are easy. That you have to worry about those comments. Renato, I'm gonna go to if you can share some of your knowledge and experience. Same question, but I'll tweak it a little bit in the sense that what were the challenge of getting Ivrea listed, and what were some of the battles that you were faced with? You are muted. Renato, you're muted. Okay, now.
Thank you. We got many challenges. At first, the state of conservation and the number of the back-end buildings is the best challenge that we have to consider. The second is that the restoration done in past, when the buildings were not protected by the Italian state, but only the municipal rules. There is a problem about this, because As I said before, we have not a special regulation or a capacity building about the restoration of the modern. And one of the buildings restored in 2000 has been listed as critical restoration. So the third, I said, there is not knowledge about modern value landmarks. Our site and our work can be considered as a benchmark, I hope, with others for protection, conservation, restoration, reuse, and adaptive reuse, also for the heritage impact assessment. You have considered the Agenda 2030 goals is a very hard problem to for the restoration of a historic and modern building listed.
Thanks, Renato. Yeah, those are good points. I'm gonna move to you, Carla, and I'm gonna tweak the question because we received a good question from Christina from the UK, and I think it fits you, that you represent Fiocruz and the goal, the mission that the Institute promotes. So the question is, could you perhaps reflect on additional challenges for buildings linked to production in the broadest sense, vaccines, typewriters, that it's buildings linked to uses and processes that keep changing at a very fast pace, but are also very representative of their particular time? Clearly thinking of example mentioned by Carla and obviously, you know, Renato. So can you give us some thoughts on this, Carla?
Yes, well, actually, in our context, when the building are still in the production line, let's say it's still used as an industrial building, it's common that it's not listed. It's difficult to recognize the building that is still use it for this purpose. Our industrial heritage generally are composed of buildings that are vacant, that are not used for industrial purpose. We also have an example in Fiocruz. So we have a building that was planned to the production of yellow fever vaccines, and it's a modern building. And we are trying that the building is recognized by the federal or local agencies as a cultural heritage. But we believe that we will only be able to do that when it's not used to the production of vaccine in the future, when the use is transferred to another place, and we will probably need an intervention of adaptive reuse. So I don't know if I answered, but in generally in Brazil we don't have this. We don't have a lot of experience on dealing with industrial heritage that are still functioning, you know, because exactly because of the change and the challenges of the use.
Thank you. Shika, I'm coming back to you with another question that we received from Marielle from Argentina. And he kind of shared the same issue you brought up about, you know, building awareness and adding more buildings to be recognized. And the question is, Is education of the public the only answer to this situation, or you think are there any means or tools that we can use to improve this situation?
I think, yeah, the awareness of public definitely, but also all stakeholders, I mean, one is, of course, the owners of the property, but even at the public sector level, because in case of India, our acts, the protection acts, you just say that anything 100 years old is heritage. So we still have not recognized, properties like which come under modern heritage, even though we have it up on the World Heritage List and on our tentative list. So I think in terms of policies, in terms of legislation, also we need to enforce it more besides the public awareness.
Glenn, I'm coming back to you with your Lever House project. Gonna provoke you a little bit. Modern movement curtain wall glazing from Julie Valencia. Good point. Glazing in decay and the effect of climate change and how to, preserve these structures, but making them more energy efficient, as many of these structures sometimes are put in front of complete replacement in order to become, more energy efficient. Take it on.
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but our focus really on the project is the landmark plaza area and the lobby. So I think maybe, I don't know, in the late mid-90s, I think there was a retrofitting of the glazing at the Lever House that took on a lot of those questions. And I think that the actual current restoration is looking at those again and evaluating those, but I'm sorry, I can't. And we're looking really at the aesthetic issues regarding the historic fabric on the ground level.
No, okay. That makes sense. It's just that, it's a pretty hot topic because,
absolutely.
How do we make this structure more energy efficient, maintaining their aesthetic and their character?
Yeah. No, I think if we look at before and after photos of the Lever House, I think you're absolutely right. Those challenges to actually have the aesthetics carry over from the original to the restored. And also, I think if we look at the Secretariat at the United Nations on the east and west facades, before and after photographs, all of those issues were taken into consideration with security modifications as well. But a very important topic that needs to be thought of in much more detail.
Hirofumi, we have a nice question for you on the challenges that you face on the renovation of the residential Danchi. This is a question from Tanya.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I'm surprised that Tanya know what we call an apartment complex as Danchi. The Danchi is an apartment complex. And okay, in the case of public housing complexes, the balance between preservation and revitalization must be carefully considered because they are at the center of life. But however, because of the individual residents, so it's sometimes very difficult to find a consensus between the community. So I think it takes so longer time than the public building than to find a consensus how to rebuild or how to renovate or how to restore the public housing complexes.
Thank you. I'm gonna move to Renato. Curious question. Can you, as you are represent, completely different side of the story, can you tell us a little bit, what is the relationship between the residents, the citizen of Ivrea with the site? Do they hate this ugly looking building or they embrace it? And what is the amount of visitors that you get every year that they drag their families to see such a site?
I'm not. Thank you. Well, there is a strong relationship between citizens and sites. A relationship not so strong during the nomination. During the nomination process, I think maybe because of the very technical process requested by the operational guidelines of UNESCO. At present, for example, we are completing some products finalized to collect the oral tradition of the community. Community is a word very important for Ivrea. And we are planning an agreement to promote the site and taking care of it with the active citizens. Now, it's different from the nomination process. At the same time, each event is coordinated with the private owners and with the stakeholder. For example, every year we have the Festival of Architecture with the visit inside the building of the site. And this is very important. For this is very important, the coordination with the owners. How many visitors? We have opened the visitor center in July 2021. And we can monitor the number for the years in June 2022. At this time, we count in January and February 400 persons per month. And for a industrial site is not is very important. Is a good number for us, but thanks to the visitor center open.
Nice. I'm hoping that some of the people that attended this webinar will make a visit there. With that, I think we are running a little bit on the clock. I just want to ask Rohit to just make few remarks if we take another question, or we're just down to the minute.
Well, Irene, I think maybe we can take another question. We have received so many questions, so maybe if there is one more question, you are welcome to take it, and then I'll go to the conclusion.
Okay. I'm gonna go to Shika and Carla to get their last thoughts. We received a good comment from Ignacio Arce from Architectural Conservation of German Jordan University that made us reflect on an important point when we're talking about modern preservation. I will just read briefly to give you a little bit an intro. Should in this case, more stress should be done on the experimental character involved in the creation of these pieces of modern architecture and the related problems resulting from their preservation. Should in this case pay more attention to the well-known intentions behind their design creation than to the preservation of the materiality. It recalls the paradigmatic case of the reconstruction of the Mies van der Rohe Barcelona pavilion, which allowed the recreation of a masterpiece, which in many cases was improved due to the non-temporal approach used for its reconstruction. Do you want to add anything to that? Shika, go first.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point, because I mean, we know the lifespan of these new materials, and just insisting on the material itself does not make sense. It's the basic philosophy and the principles of modernism and the design itself that needs to be conserved. And this is something that we have recognized in whichever modern conservation management plan that we made for a modern heritage building. And that's why in our policies, which you will find in a number of, the Getty research-based documents, we especially recognize the idea of behind the design and the architect's, concept. So there is a specific policy that says, it should be in sync whatever reuse is proposed, whatever conservation is proposed, the primary aim is that it should be in sync with the idea, with the design idea of the architect and his philosophy. And after that, we look at other aspects of conservation and materials, etc.
Great. Carla, would you like to add anything to this?
Yes, I think it should be a balance between the design, the intention of the architect, the whole history before the building was constructed. We were talking about, for example, the industrial heritage, industrial buildings that change a lot, and shouldn't we preserve that also when we decide that it's cultural heritage? So I think it should be a balance between the design idea, the whole history of the building, and the characteristics of the materials, because in our case, it's a mix of new materials and traditional materials, because our industry was really recent. So we mixed a lot of old techniques and new ones. So I believe, of course, in some cases, it's really difficult to conserve everything, but I think that we should also try to balance these 2 points of view.
Great. No, makes sense. To all the panelists, before Rohit cuts me out, I just want to ask one thing. Give us a slogan, give us a couple of words that you want as a final remarks, or any curiosity you just discover and wants to share with the audience. We'll start with Carla and go back up the list.
I don't know, curiosity. Well, the only thing I would like to reinforce, I think all my colleagues talks about that, is the how difficult it is and how we have to struggle every day for these buildings to be recognized. I think that's, if I could summarize, it's probably the source of a lot of problems we face with modern heritage, because architects don't understand the value very much. Users don't understand and often don't appreciate it. So I think, to sum up, I think that we should continue on this struggle and heritage education and actions to show everyone how important they are.
Great. Renato, the floor is yours.
Please repeat the answer, please.
No, give us.
I got the major in my office.
No, give us 3 words or a slogan you want to leave everybody with, fresh in mind, or a curiosity, or you can just say visit Ibrahi as a
you have
conclusion.
to come. You have to come in Italy. You have to come in Ibrahi, because it's a fantastic city and it has a fantastic history.
And obviously great food. Glenn, you're next. Thanks, Renato.
I think listening to everyone and looking at the pictures and hearing the different challenges, it strikes me how similar it all is, and how important it is to design guidelines and repair criteria that have a commonality. I don't know, I think one of the things that strike me as extremely important is to focus on that, and to maybe as a group be able to disseminate that information.
100%. Hirofumi.
Yeah, I would say just sharing wisdom with the world. Actually, I think our effort in Japan for conserve modern heritage is not well known in the world, but actually we try to conserve so many modern heritages as much as possible, and there has been and will continue to be an increasing commitment to modern heritage in Japan. So I would appreciate to share our knowledge with the rest of the world.
Great, thank you. Shika, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. For the Indian context, I would say learn to value modern heritage and increase listing and protection and means for conserving it.
Great, thank you. Rohit, sorry, but back to you.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much, Irene. Thank you for your excellent moderation and also to all the panelists. So I would like to mention here that ICROM is dedicated towards new innovative practices, approaches for conservation and management of built heritage, especially through its program Sustainability and Built Heritage, which is catering to respond to the increasing impact of global challenges that include disasters, pandemics, climate change, conflicts, and pressures from urbanization and tourism on built heritage. And by built heritage, we include many kinds of built heritage, ranging from buildings, sites, and historic cities. We will in fact soon relaunch our international course on conservation of built heritage, CBH, which has been running for many years, and now we will relaunch it in 2023, that's next year. This overarching course will be centered on innovative approaches for built heritage conservation and management aimed at protecting the values while ensuring continuity and evolution within a sustainable development framework that we have been really speaking about. So before concluding this webinar, I would like to once again express gratitude to Irene for your excellent moderation. Thank you very much, Irene. You really made the whole webinar very live with your impromptu kind of questions and discussions, and also to all the panelists for your very thought-provoking presentations and also your perspectives, and also to our organizing team here at ICROM who have been really working hard to bring these webinars to you. We also thank all the attendees for participating in the webinar and raising important questions, important comments. The recorded version of this webinar will be shortly made available on our YouTube channel here at ICROM, which is linked to our website. Please note that these can be visited at ICROM lecture series page if you go to our website. Information on our future webinars is made available at our website and you can see the 3 forthcoming webinars that are going to be there in the coming months. So thank you once again to all of you for joining us for this webinar. I hope you enjoyed these presentations, discussions, and I hope you carry with you a lot of food for thought on how we can go and continue to work towards protecting our modern heritage in each of our own context. So thank you once again. Thank you very much to all of you. Goodbye and stay safe.
Thank you, Rohit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.